This is Trekland, and we are live. 25 years since the passing of DeForest Kelley, with today's special guest, author and D. Kelley confidant, Kris Smith. Yes, today on Trekland Tuesdays Live with me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek, coming at you here from the heart of Trekland, Portal 47 and Trekland Treks and all good things. It's number 354 right here from the heart of Trekland, from Portal 47 and Trekland Treks, for a sanity, clarity, and a bigger picture in all things Star Trek. And yes, today, my other special guest, Plushy McCoy, is here. I'm a doctor, not a podcaster. I know, Plushy. I know. But I knew you would want to have a special seat of honor here to see today's show, because we're going to jump right into it. And gang, look, if you are coming to us on YouTube or Twitch, you're going to see all the comments in our chat room, and I welcome you to jump in there and do that. If you're new to the show, that's where a lot of things happen. We're having a little bit different. We're in guest format today. So not our typical soapbox and chat, but it's great to have guests. So we're going to be diving in and out of the chat all the time. But as we get started here, if you're new to Tuesdays Live, introduce yourself, say where you are in the world. We are at this time of day, and we've got folks with us from all over. It's awesome. Let us know how it's happening. How's the weather? Yada, yada. But most of all, it's all about D. Kelley's passing 25 years ago. I can't believe it. I mark his birth every year on my blog and here on Tuesdays Live. But it's an anniversary like this makes us think, and I've got someone great to think about it with today. So if you're joining us on YouTube or Twitch, you're going to see all the comments in the chat. If you're only on Facebook, you're only going to see the Facebook comments. So please come over to YouTube and like and subscribe, ring the bell, do all those things when you get over to YouTube. Now, we're also a super chat on YouTube, so I will look for especially anybody who is chiming in there with a super chat donation, and we will get to you first, especially today since I'm keeping up with the chat. All right. And listen, for all of you watching us later on YouTube, welcome. Please go ahead and leave a comment here below too when you get to us, and maybe sometime you can catch us live on Tuesday afternoons at 1 Pacific-ish, 4 Eastern, 8 UK time, and 9 UK time, and 10 Central Europe. All right. I can't wait for today. I can't believe how the years fly by. And as we're in the middle of so much Star Trek, such an evolving landscape. A few weeks ago, I did a topic about McCoy. And D. Kelley was, of course, swept up in that. So you can go back. I may even make some of those points again today when we get rolling. But I just, especially as we prepare to get started here, and I bring my guest, just remind you very quickly that it's summertime season for making your own away mission to LA. Please get in touch with me at treklandtreks.com if you're LA bound and you want to put together your own custom away mission to location film sites wherever you are in LA. And for now, a quick shout out to all of our Patreons. We'll get to them at the end of the show too, but thank you for helping spread the spread here of Trekland and all things on our Trekland channel. And without further ado, I want to bring in somebody, and I'm going to do this way. 25 years ago, I'll tell this story. We were planning our issue of Communicator and pulled up stakes when I heard the news, and we'll remember that too in a minute, and went with the sad passing, which was not widely known to all. You'd hear rumors about D was not doing well. And our guest today is someone who was not only in the mix there and helping taking care of D and Caroline, but was there with him. So the author of several books about D over the years, I'm going to bring her in now, Kris Smith, author of those books about D because you were with D and Caroline so much. So welcome to Trekland Tuesdays Live. Let's do this. Welcome to Tuesdays Live, Kris.
Thank you.
On a bittersweet day, but a day when I want to think after all this time, we have so many new generations of fans. It's a good day for sharing and keeping, we'll always remember him. He'll always be with us as long as we remember him, to quote Rathacon. And so I'm glad you could join with us today. And on the 25th anniversary of Dee's passing, it's amazing.
Yes, I'm very delighted to be here. I was feeling really awful yesterday. In fact, I wrote a blog post about today because I didn't know if I'd be able to do it today. Because this is
Yeah.
literally 25 years today is when he passed away at noon at 12:15 on this day, and I got so busy right away, notifying people and taking care of Carolyn and preparing for a memorial service and stuff like that, that it was a traumatic, exhausting day. And yet it's the last time I was with Dee too. So um, up until this 25th anniversary, I've always been able to say, well, but just think of all the many years we had, how many June 11ths we had for so many years where Dee was in our life and alive and well. And so I've always been able to get past most of them. But this one at the 25th anniversary, it just really hit me hard to think that it's been a quarter of a century since I was sitting beside him. It in a way, it feels like it was forever ago. In a way, it feels like it just happened yesterday because I started really thinking about that again, But
Right.
most of my reminiscences are so much fun and so funny and so poignant and so delightful. He was such a sassy, gentle, loving, compassionate, tuned in guy with his fans. And I got to see an awful lot of that because I went to a lot of the conventions as a fan as well as a friend. And so my memories now, except for on a day like this, they all fly toward joy.
Right.
And I feel sorry for the people who have come up since his passing, who have only been able to see him as characters, or maybe get on YouTube and see him in short blurbs from conventions or interviews with him, because he was a rather shy guy and he wasn't terribly comfortable doing interviews. I mean, he was pleasant and gentlemanly and kind, and you could tell his spirit, but you didn't get the sense that you really knew him terribly well from
And
those.
he wasn't a gung-ho Hollywood celebrity.
Not at all.
Not at all. They didn't. And Carolyn was the same way, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and they didn't go to even as, I mean, you say, well, my gosh, he was quasi-retired by the time Star Trek got big, but they weren't big party goers. They didn't go hang to hang.
Not at all. For I think their 50th anniversary, I called AC Lyles, one of their dearest friends at Paramount, a producer, and I said, I'd like to get them a surprise. I'd like to order them a limousine and take them to their favorite restaurant and just have them have a 50th anniversary meal on me. I said, where should I take them? He said, Kris, I've known these people for 50 years. I have no idea. They never go anywhere. They never do anything. Whenever they have time, they go and they visit their friends in Long Beach, or they go and do this or that or the other thing. And I said, I don't know what to tell you. So I ended up doing something else. I just couldn't get anything really,
Yeah.
So, they were just so down to earth and so, there are some things words can't describe, I try, but anybody who met him, you met him, anybody who met him, spent any time at all with him, you felt this spirit in him that was just like love, promotion, encouragement, just everything you can imagine in a person who your champion. He was your champion, whoever you were, he was wonderful.
Well, I just remember being a fan growing up watching the show, and most of my people in my community know that it's harder and harder to do this as the years go by, as more and more Treks come out. And it's on that spectrum of what's your favorite episode, who's your favorite character, who's your favorite actor. Well, the more, we keep adding, and so much of it's so great that I don't know if it's always if it's in the casting notice. I know it would probably be discriminatory if it said, you must be a Star Trek fan, you must be open-minded in your thinking and leaning into the future, on a casting notice or a hiring notice or something. But Star Trek attracts so many of those people, or the ones that stick. Whether it's cast who have a public persona, or so many of the behind the scenes folks. So it gets harder and harder over the years because the Star Trek family keeps growing.
Sure.
And yet it was so easy when I was a kid and there was just the original series. There was no bloody A, B, C, or D. And it was just the original cast. And you enjoyed the show, obviously.
Yeah.
But I just remember after a year or 2 or 3, part of it was the underdog in me, the underdog supporter. And when it kind of crystallized in the early days, and you'd go to buy a t-shirt or some poster or something, and here's Kirk and Spock and the ship and the crew shot. But I was always, like, where's McCoy and where's Scotty? And it really crystallized. By the time I realized what top billing meant above the line, it's like, well, where's McCoy? Why can't I buy McCoy stuff? And at the same time, it also kind of dawned on me watching reruns after reruns and starting to read some of the behind the scenes, that it was that old line about, well, of everybody, D was just the one that struck. He's the one I would most like when I have dinner with. And I don't mean that against any of the other actors in the original cast, but it was like, I felt like he was the one who would be the easiest to go have dinner with. You know what I mean? And that grounded, and some of that was Bill and Leonard were still building careers, and the rest of them were kind of being sideswiped by being stereotyped. They were like, hey, it's a great, not only was it a great gig, this fandom, we invented a whole new paradigm that is idolizing me as an icon, but I still got to work and pay my mortgage. I have a few more years left on this earth, and D was the one that in so many ways was, I don't want to say in the middle, but he was like on the fulcrum of,
I think,
what I'm saying? Like both between the fandom reaction and also like the cast interior working, he was like at the pivot point on the call sheet where he would kind of, be the negotiator back, as well as a fulcrum between Shatner and Nimoy too. Anyway, there was just so many ways that it's like he was born to be in that role, not just the role of McCoy, but that role in the cast and what became Star Trek.
I think another way to say what you're saying, maybe a little shorter way, is to say the rest of the cast was hungry.
Yes.
Hungry for acknowledgement.
He was ready for retirement.
He was too, but he was not starving. He had already been a working actor for 20 years.
Yes.
He felt very fortunate and very blessed, but he was very relaxed. He was not hungry. He was satisfied. And because he was not hungry, because he wasn't hungry, he was just so balanced. And you're right, to have a meal with him, it was like, my dad finally met him after these many years of me talking about him. And he said, Kris, you're totally over the top about this guy. You talk to him about him like he's a second coming. The minute he met him, he went, I get it. I get what you are saying now. And D and Caroline came over around Thanksgiving time one time to meet Mom and Dad for the first time. And Dad said Dad knew D from his Westerns before Star Trek. And
he was mainly a bad guy.
Where he was mainly a bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dad said to him, he said, I cannot understand how you did those roles as a bad guy. Sitting here with you now, you're such a gentleman. He says, you don't look like you could act at all. And he threw his head back. He took that as a really huge compliment. No, I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else.
Well, I was going to say, he should have said, that's why they call it acting.
Yes.
People who are that way in real life are usually not stable enough to get up and show up at 7 in the morning or 6 in the morning, every day.
He just made it so easy to get to know him. He just didn't, try to put a pedestal under him because he'd kick it out. He did not want that. He wanted friends. He didn't want fans, or he wanted the fans to realize that you're not just a fan. I mean, if you're following my career and helping support me and what the things that fans do, you are special to me, Yeah. And I think an awful lot of hungry actors don't have that. They have look at all those people, I'm important because all of those people, but not in the
Well, I
way
mean,
you did it.
I mean, part of this is you understand. I mean, it's not that all actors are demons.
No, no.
They can get one. It's so hard
It
to
is
get
hard.
any notice
It
that
is.
when you finally get your foot in the door, of course you want to push the door open
Yes.
wider and you want to do all the things the right way.
Correct.
And it's good to see, especially as time has gone on, so many of the Star Trek folks not only get it with fandom, but they realize, and now we live in a time when platform is a word, and so many of the actors, they're barely like their new show has debuted 3 episodes and you're already getting their personality and they're already speaking out for what cause they want to be known for. And in the modern world of celebrities, platforming and speakership, they're there, and so many of them go down that way. And that didn't exist then, but they still had those. And so it took a while for the personality to come through. If you weren't getting it through their character and their acting, then you picked up on it fairly soon. And then Star Trek had not invented conventions, but invented media conventions.
Right.
And people got that connection too. But that's why I'm saying that came through the TV to me as a kid sitting in the middle of Oklahoma, that I just had that feeling that's what he was about. Well, I want to back up for a minute because I've got these pictures you sent me, and some of them I've seen, and some of these were new. People are sitting there wondering, well, how did you get to know Dee at the beginning in the first place? How did you get into their orbit?
I was a fan. I was watching Star Trek, and I heard that he was going to be in a parade in Wenatchee, Washington, which is halfway across the state from me, and I wanted to go meet him. But I was a brand new driver, scared to death. Mom and Dad couldn't take me. They said, well, if you want to take a car, go ahead and go on over. Well, as luck would have it, my friend and I went over, and as luck would have it, the limousine that was going to be carrying them in the parade was parked on the sidewalk. And I thought, if I loiter shamelessly, maybe I can just actually get a chance to. I wish you'd put you up again, Larry, because I don't like looking at me.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I'm trying to give you some focus, but okay.
I know. But that feels like I'm talking to myself then, and I don't like that. So
there's
anyhow,
a whole chat room out here that we're going to get to in a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. I got there, and the limousine was there. It said, Mr. and Mrs. DeForest Kelley, Star Trek. And I thought, my God, if I loiter, maybe I can actually meet him. And he came out. And remember, I was also a Western fan before Star Trek. So I had seen him as Toby Jack Saunders. I didn't know what I was going to get. I really didn't. I thought, okay, do we have Toby? Do we have Dr. McCoy? Even Dr. McCoy is kind of curmudgeonly.
And you were how old?
I was, let me see, about 17.
Okay.
Okay.
And it was a world where we didn't have these people on YouTube and Twitter.
No,
they were still enigmas.
Right.
Unless you lived down the block. Right.
So I didn't know what I was going to get. And Dee and Caroline came out and got in the car, and they didn't take off right away. So these other fans approached the car, and I stayed back because I thought, am I going to be disappointed if I meet this guy? You don't want to be disappointed. So I was waiting, and he was just so kind and tuned in and compassionate and sweet. And I went, okay. And I finally screwed up the courage to ask him, and I got his autograph at that point. And we exchanged a few words, and I just went, my gosh, he's fabulous, And so on the way home, I thought I would write a creative writing article about meeting him as an essay for my English class. And I call it, How Clever Was This? The Real McCoy. And I wrote about meeting him and what we did, and my teacher read it, and he said, that's really, really great. Why don't you send a copy to Mr. Kelley? And I'm like, what? No, I don't write to movie stars. I don't write to TV stars. And he said, Kris, look, if you impressed somebody as obviously as he impressed you, wouldn't you want to know? Mm-hmm. And I went, yeah, but he's an actor. He probably hears this 10 times a day. I mean, I was backpedaling like crazy because it was embarrassing to me to think, I don't know if I want him to know how crazy I was about him, kind of a thing, Mm-hmm. And so basically he just pulled rank on me. The teacher pulled rank, said, send it. And I thought, he can mark me down in citizenship or whatever they can do if you don't behave. So
Kris, what was his name?
Mr. Walter Dobbs.
Okay, so we have Mr. Dobbs to thank for this
Yes,
odyssey.
And
Okay.
you have Mrs. Alpha Rossetti, my junior high teacher, to thank for my ability to write that article, because she bought me 2 years of the Writer magazine. She said, "You're a really good writer." And I said, "Well, help me be better." And she says, "I can't help you be better. I'm not a writer, but I am a reader, and I know good writing when I see it." So then she got me two, because she knew she couldn't help me improve. She got me a subscription to 2 years of the Writer magazine, which became my Bible. I mean, I practically memorized it. So that when I met D, I wrote this article. He sends it off to a TV Star Parade, and they wanted to publish it as a special article. And I'm like, so D wrote, and he said,
that was a magazine, right? Or a Sunday
magazine, TV Star Parade magazine, yeah. So D wrote back to say, we enjoyed your story so much that we sent it to a publisher in New York, and they want to publish it. Would that be okay with you? And I'm like, my parents had to peel me off the ceiling. It was so okay with me,
Did you ever get back? I mean, not get back, but did you ever have a final ha-ha about your parents who were leery about letting their 17-year-old go across the state?
Oh, not across the state, but when Dee and Caroline encouraged me to move to Hollywood, they were just flying off the handle and said, "Kris, that place is full of the devil down there. You're just going to get in all kinds of trouble. You're a single woman. You can't go down." And I said, "It just depends on who you hang with down there, just like any other place, And so anyhow, I went because it had been my lifelong dream to work in Hollywood. And so I went.
Well, no, wait. So. And I want to we'll get back to D, but again, as far as how you came into their orbit, so you had this amazing experience.
Yes.
The thing is published. He instigates it.
Yes.
So then what was the next?
Then he wrote back. I wrote to thank him when it was published. And he wrote back and said, "Well, I hope this makes you a celebrity in your own right in Cle Elum. Keep up the good work." And I was going to write them again, because being a little writer, I had like 25 pen pals, and I was writing to people all over Jekyll and Lichtenberg, you just name it, all of the Star Trek people. I was writing them. I was pen pals with everybody. And I was going to write again. And my mother says, "Kris, the man has been very kind to you. Don't drive him crazy with your incessant letters." And I thought, she's right. And so this will kill you. This kills me to think about it. But about that time, we started building restaurants all over the country. My dad was a general contractor, and he got this big contract to work all over the country building some of the big name restaurants. And I went with them, and we were like living like turtles. I didn't have an address, and I just stopped writing to them. I just stopped interacting because Mom had said, "Don't do that." And I thought, how big a deal am I to the Kellys anyway? I mean, you don't realize, And so I connected with them again. I'm not kidding you, during the 20th anniversary of Star Trek. So we went from 1968 to 1986 or 87.
Almost 20 years.
Almost without even, saying boo. But then, Larry, all during this time, I started having these dreams that I was plopped in a neighborhood in Southern California, and I had a message to give to Dee from Caroline, but I didn't know what their house looked like. But I knew they had a turtle. And in my dream, I'm looking over these, walls in Southern California and looking to find Myrtle. For I had this over and over again. And then this dream evolves into the place where I'm finding Myrtle everywhere, at lakes.
No, wait. Did you know about Myrtle, or did you just come up with that?
I know about Myrtle. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, that's really weird if you're just dreaming that he has a
turtle. No.
Okay.
It was well known during Star Trek that you had a turtle.
That's what,
yeah. And so
letting everybody that didn't know that here watching.
It all evolved, and I kept having, and then the dream evolved to where I was sitting in their home with them, just like family, discussing the most mundane things and feeling like I was in a family with them. So I'm having all these dreams, and then the 20th anniversary of Star Trek comes up, and there's going to be a
boom.
There you go. There's going to be a convention in Spokane, Washington. And I thought, well, this is my chance, because during this time I was also writing articles and getting people, especially animal welfare articles. And so I thought, I owe him a long overdue thank you for launching my writing career. And I sent him this little note saying just that. I owe you a long overdue hug. And he sent me this little note back that said, enjoyed the pictures of your home and pets, wishing you continued success. And I thought, well, what does that mean? Does he really want to see me? I mean, there was no promise. There was no nothing there. And then I realized that I said, I owe you a long overdue hug. And I got really, really insecure and like teenager. I said, that was a stupid thing to say, and I almost talked myself out of going. I just was like, you just reverted back to your 17-year-old self when you wrote that letter. And I got scared and I almost didn't go. But I had a little 11-year-old nephew named Philip, who was also a Trek fan, and he wanted to go. I'd never been to a Star Trek convention at all. So it was like walking into me. I thought I was going to walk into this convention where everybody was painted blue and in Starfleet uniforms. And I thought, I'm going to stick out like a sore thumb, if I walk in there, just me, and my nephew. So I was really, really hesitant, almost didn't go. And then I realized, well, I told him I owed him. And what if he, I finally said, oh, stop.
You clearly have all the writer's neuroses, Kris.
Stop. So I have all those writer's neuroses. There's no way that this can possibly mean as much to him as it means to me. So yeah, go anyway. Don't expect a darn thing. I was pretty broke at the time, so my Philip and I stayed at a KOA campground instead of the hotel. We did go to the hotel early before the convention started. I brought the article that he had published for me, hoping if I meet him, I'll have him sign it for me, Mm-hmm. So I went to the hotel and I said to the concierge, could you get a note to Mr. Kelley for me? No, we can't do that. And I got it. Everybody wants a note to somebody. We can't do that. A million people asked that question. I went, I know, I get it. Okay. Unbeknownst to me, I found this out later, obviously, Dee and Caroline were trying to find me. They called the convention hotel. Wow. They called other hotels trying to find me, and they couldn't find me anywhere because I was at a KOA campground. So he wasn't speaking till Sunday. I was there on Sunday. We got a seat about 14 rows back, and then I noticed that a lot of people were taking up the aisles and going up right by the stage, and I wanted to get closer. Again, this is 18 years since I met him the first time. He doesn't remember, what I look like or anything. And Philip stayed back in the seats in the back. He said, no, I'm going to stay here and hold our seats because if the fire marshal or somebody says, you guys got to clear the aisles, you'll have someplace to go. I mean, very thoughtful for a little.
I was going to say for an 11-year-old, yeah.
Yeah. But I went down there and I sat pretty close to the maybe eight people behind at the stage. And Dee came out, and the place, there had to be 3,000 people in that place. And I mean, it was, anytime Dee was at a convention, there's an uproar. People are just standing up and cheering, and they're just happy as clams. And so he read one of his poems, and then he started to talk, and then he opened up, as he always did, for questions from the fans.
Right. And this is 1986, right?
This is 1980. Yes, 1986.
So this is right before Star Trek 4 comes out.
Yes. So before the next generation.
Right. Before Next Generation. They haven't announced Next Generation
yet.
Right.
Correct.
But everybody is, there's a buzz about the whales.
Yes.
And people are excited about that. So they're kind of quasi promoting that, but still just celebrating the 20th. And right.
So I'm sitting there. Dee comes out and he does his thing, and then he's talking, and then he opens up, and I'm sitting there thinking, I do not want to make, I don't want to, stand up and say anything at all because I'm shy. Okay.
Oh, Kris.
And Dee, at some point, he looks at his watch, and I go, oh boy, if you don't do it now, he's looking to see, am I almost done, And I thought, if I don't do it now, I will never do it. And I raised my hand, and he did not recognize me. And there were other hands up. So this is like...
Had you sent a picture of yourself in all that time when you were writing at the beginning?
No.
Okay. So we had no clue. Yeah.
Nope, no clue. Raised my hand, and he looked at me and he said, "Yes, you." And I said very quietly, just, I just wanted to thank you for launching my writing career. And he goes, "Are you Kris?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, let me tell you about this girl." And he tells the whole audience about me, and I'm flabbergasted. This Phil Donahue type runs up and he sticks a microphone in my face, and I am speechless. I don't know what to say. So finally I say, whisper into the microphone, hoping only Dee will hear.
Right.
"May I give you a hug?" And he says, "You certainly may. Get up here, So I got up to the stage and I hugged him and I said, "Thank you." And he says, "We're very proud of you. Don't lose touch." I said, "Okay, thank you, thank you." I got back down, went back and sat by Philip at that point, and I said, "Were you embarrassed when I asked for a hug?" And he goes, "No, I was proud,
It was awesome. Now, so when maybe you're going to get to it. I've cut you. When was this photo taken then?
This photo was taken almost immediately thereafter. Dee left the stage, and I said, if we hurry, we might be able to get out of here and out around, and maybe we can get our picture taken with him. And so we went out and around, and he came out, and I said, "Mr. Kelley, I don't want to slow you down." He said, "Oh, no, Kris, what do you need?" And I said, "Well, I just like to have, if I might, have a picture taken with me." "Oh, absolutely," So Philip tried to take the picture, and he was so shaky and rattly and scared, that a 30-year-old offered to take that picture.
Okay.
So then,
and we're not talking camera phones. We're talking you had your camera,
yes.
and
and he's saying again, "Don't lose touch." I said, "Okay." So then later on that same weekend, this is a long story. I wrote a book, guys. You want to go through this whole thing? I saw him a little bit later. We saw him in the restaurant there, and Phil said, "I sure like to get his autograph." I said, "We are not going to go and interrupt the man at dinner." I mean, Gene Roddenberry, Major, the whole table was full of Star Trek people. And he said, I know we can't do that." Well, then Dee got up and went into the restroom, and Phil brightens up, I went, "You're not going into the bathroom." And, no, but I could stand outside and wait till he comes out. And I'm like, "Oh my God." I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to go hide around the corner so he doesn't think this is my idea." So I go and I hide around the corner and wait and wait and wait. Finally, Phil comes around beaming, and he says, "I got his autograph." And I said, "Well, that's great." And he goes, "When I first talked to him, I made a mistake. I said, 'Hi, I'm Kris's aunt.'" And she said, "You are?" And Phil said, "I mean, Kris is my aunt." And Dee said, "That's what I thought you meant," and took a picture. He says, "Well, where's Kris?" Dee asked Phil, "Where's Kris?" And Phil says, "She's hiding around the corner." So, So the next day, I'm standing in this huge crowd of Star Trek folks. It's the end of the day. People are going home. The lobby is filled with Star Trek fans. I'm at one end of the thing, and the desk where people leave is clear at the other end of this big, huge area. And Dee and Caroline come out to head toward the car that's going to take them back to the airport. And I'm standing there, and I'm thinking, I'm sure glad I'm over here, because Dee heard I was hiding around the corner, when Philip, and I'm really kind of glad I'm here, and way out here. Dee looks across the room and he goes, "Kris, good morning." And he waves at me, and I'm like, "Hi." And so he grabs Caroline and he starts pulling her in my direction. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh," So then I realized my responsibility, and we meet halfway there. Caroline grabs both of my hands and she said, Dee said, "You remember Caroline?" I said, "Of course." And Caroline grabs both of my hands. She says, "We always wondered what happened to the little girl who wrote so well. Don't lose touch." And I said, "Okay." Send us your article again. She gives me her address. I'm like, holy smokes, they are so serious. Then I became their pen pal. 18 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyhow, it's a long story. That's just the very beginning.
No. That's it's great because it's a personal connection. It's the personal story, and I love those kinds of things because I realize every year, every decade that goes by, the central core of Star Trek pulls people in for the same reasons, I think. But all the surrounding trappings are different, and we just lived differently. I mean, if I had a camera phone now in the in the 90s, I would have so many cool pictures.
Yeah.
But back in the day, you either didn't have a camera or it was forbidden where you would, I mean, there's just cell phones and calling and emailing versus writing versus tweet. I mean, there's so much different that it's the same but different. And here, just going to a convention and experience and all that, there's so much that's exactly the same as so much. So no, it's all good. But I was going to put up now some of your pictures. Let me jump back to the beginning here. This is such a nice one here. Let me get us to the side. Yeah.
That was taken in about 1991 after they had encouraged me to move down to Hollywood. And Bill Dow, the person who is the official photographer for Tippi Hedren's Wildlife Preserve, Shambhala, he was a wildlife photographer. But I had asked Dee and Carolyn at one point, why have you ever had your pictures taken together? I said, no, who would want one? We don't have kids. I said, a lot of people would like pictures of you together. Are you kidding me? And she said, well, let me think about it. Let me think
about it. Oh, my gosh.
So she called the next day. She said, yeah, I think we would like to do that. And I said, okay, super. Bill Dell will do it for nothing. I mean, he'll come to my backyard, set up a thing, and we'll do it right there. And that gave him another opportunity to meet Deacon. Oh, you guys don't know about Deacon yet. My serval, I had a serval cat. Give him another chance to be with Deacon because Carolyn and Dee loved my kitty cat, my big kitty cat. And
well, they were big animal because the North Shore Animal League was one of his.
North Shore Animal League, yes.
Yeah, which is still
so Bill Dow came over and he started to take I've got way more pictures of this same day. Bill apologized at first. He said, I'm used to taking pictures of leopards and lions, not people, and dogs and cats. I'm a pet photographer. I'm not a person photographer. And I noticed in front of Bill's, box of goodies were a bunch of these little squeaky toys. And I started picking them. I said, not to worry. And I picked them up and went, Dee, squeak, squeak, squeak. Carolyn, squeak, squeak, squeak. And we have some really, really funny photos of them reacting to that. Dee started barking and Carolyn started meowing, to help Bill feel better. They were just so fun. They were just so much fun.
Here we go. Here's you mentioned your book. So this is like the recent iteration here. And I think I'm going to put it in the chat here. It's been out for a while, but if anybody's interested there.
2016, that was the 50th anniversary edition. It's a much expanded version of the one that came out shortly after September 11th, 2001. A very expanded version because back in the day, almost before POD, having a book that would have been 700 and so many pages long was just too big. I mean, they weren't, unless it was Ulysses or something, what we would call a classic, they just didn't print them like that. So I had to keep it under 248 pages, around 300 pages. And so there was a whole lot in the first edition that didn't get into the second edition. And there was a lot about Dee's final days in the first edition that I didn't really want in the second edition because I wanted the second edition to be mostly about all the funny, fun, terrific things that happened and not the final days, because that's sad. The final days there was still some funny stuff going on. But, everybody cries like crazy. So I didn't want that happening. So this edition that came out in 2016 eliminated an awful lot of the end of it. This is a car they surprised me with. That's in the book.
I was going to say, what is going on here?
what is going on?
This is their house, right?
This is their house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I had a wreck of a car that kept breaking down, and so finally I said, look, I'm going to go get a loan at the credit union, and I'm going to go find a car. And he said, good, keep me in the loop. And they both said, keep us in the loop, we want to know. And so I got a loan for, I think, about $5,000, which back then was plenty for a car. And I had the auto mechanic who had been taking care of my piece of crap car, was on the lookout for a good little car for me. And he found one that had been a, what do they call them? A rental car. Mm-hmm. It had been kept in really good shape. It looked like it was off the showroom floor, and it was only $3,000. And Herrera put it up on the thing, and he said, you know, it needs about $3,000 worth of work, or $2,000 worth of work, but I'll do that for you. So it came in at under what I wanted to pay, you know, at what I could get a loan for. And Dee and Caroline said, well, let us loan you the money. Instead of you having to get a credit union, you know, and have to pay that back at 10% interest, let us just give you a loan, and you zero interest. You can pay it back as long as you want, you know, take as long as you want to pay us back for it. And I balked at that, and I, you know, oh my God, you know, and I said, do it, come on, do it. That's what we want to do. So this is the night I got it, and I brought it back, and Caroline handed me she gave me the check to go get it. And I went and got it, and I brought it back, and they wanted to see it. And she said, this is our gift to you. And I'm like, no. And they said, yes, this is our gift to you. You stop worrying about things, you know. And wow. I went home in a state of shock.
Yeah.
And on the 1 month anniversary, when I would have been paying my first payment, I was in the lot in the parking garage at Warner Brothers, and I realized I would be making my first payment today, and I just burst into tears. Burst into tears. I could not believe it. They were just incredible, you know. They were just incredible. Then they did help me when I got my condo. They lent me the down payment, and I did. I said, not unless you're going to let me pay you back. I am not going to do that.
I'm going to do through that again.
No. They said, oh no, you have to pay this back. You have to pay this back. 10 years. Well, 10 years. It was, you know, I paid him back in like 2, you know, but I said, no, I heard this story before. I would not do that. Mom and Dad really couldn't afford to do it, and they could. Yeah. So it was like, let us help, you know. And
so is this that same car, or is this what's going on?
This is that same car. They came out, and I got that on June, and I think this was August when they came out to see Deacon again. Deacon was nearing the end of his life, and my serval son, and they wanted to come see him again. And so this was one of the last times they were out when Deacon was still alive.
And I meant to go in, and I forgot. I was going to try to enhance the sticker on the back window.
The sticker says, "May DeForest bewitch you." Uh-huh. Like, may the 4th be with you. Right. And I had another one that said, I have been seduced by the dark side of DeForest. I did 2 plays on Star Wars themes.
Yeah, there's that one. Let me see. Is this another one from
that's
your
Deacon. That's Deacon, and that's the cat that Dee and Caroline were crazy about. Everybody was crazy about it, but Deacon met Caroline first, and he could feel complete fearlessness and complete love from her. The minute she walked in, young children and fearless people could walk in and meet this cat like nobody's business. But if you were all afraid, he would feel that fear, and he would back up because he didn't know it was you were afraid of. Wild cats, and most cats, have a flight distance and a fight or flight response. And if you're approaching them and you are fearful, they figure, well, you must be here with bad intention, are going to attack
Right.
me, or you're going to do something. So anybody who was nervous around Deacon, he didn't really want to meet. But anybody who just came in here with complete abandon and wild love, you could squeeze him to death and he'd be a sweetheart,
Where are you here?
This is at Shambhala. This is
Okay.
Deacon stayed up at Tippy Hedren's Shambhala Preserve for 15 months while I was landing a job in Hollywood that was as permanent as you can be in the entertainment industry, and finding a landlord who would let me have a wild cat in the backyard. I had to get permits. I had to get all this, endangered species permits and everything in order to have him. So there was a lot of red tape to get through.
Now we're hopping around in time, obviously. This is obviously a con, but what's going on?
Los Angeles convention. One of my friends made a crocheted doll and wanted me to give it to him. And I had to come with a story for why I would give him a doll, and I said, so this story is about her husband was a Toby Westerns fan, and she was a Star Trek fan. And the story I told her was, when she made this little doll, she named her Mint Julep. And she told her husband she was going to give it to DeForest Kelley. And her husband went, what? And he says, I'm going to give it to DeForest Kelley. He said, you're going to give a doll to Toby Jack Saunders? Because that's really what happened. He just couldn't see this at all. So I was.
Oh, you have a little faith. Now, so by this time, were you like Dee's assistant at cons?
No, I wasn't his assistant until about the last 90 days of his life.
Well, when I say assistant, I mean like if you were going to go to a con where he was, would he say, I want Kris to be my table mate or my, or was that a thing?
He didn't really have table mates. He didn't do too many signings or anything at the time. The last 10 years or so, because it always killed him to sign and not be able to sign anymore. And then these people who had waited 5 hours didn't get a signature. And he says, look, if you'll write to me at home, I will sign. But I don't want to do the table thing anymore. He didn't want to do that because he felt too many people went away feeling bad. And he said, if you write to me, I will send you a sign. And he did.
Yeah, he loved to do those. Yeah. I didn't put you sent me. So now what is this?
This was the 75th anniversary, his 75th birthday. And this was the little box of gift that my friend and I sent him for his 75th birthday. I worked at Warner Brothers, as you can tell.
So this is 94?
74. Yes.
Okay.
His 75th. Yeah. So, the Tweety Bird and the Bugs Bunny, that's all Warner Brothers related stuff, even though he was a Paramount man. But my boss at Warner Brothers turned me loose the last 4 months of Dee's life to take care of Dee. Said, you have carte blanche. However much you need to be away, you go take care of him, because he was a Trekkie. And he actually gave me all this leeway to leave. I mean, literally on a moment's notice, if Caroline would call or Dee would call, I could leave at any time. I could stay away, and they held my position for me. Because
what part of the industry was it?
He was in the MIS department, management, IT tech.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. On him. Okay. Well, that's so that's from 94. Okay.
That's from 94. And that was another picture. Oh, go back.
Yes. Okay. This is wonky. There you go.
That was taken at the same time.
That same shoot. Yeah.
The other one. Yeah. And I got several really, really nice photos of them that they really.
Isn't it so funny that they're thinking they don't need a picture of themselves?
I know. I just couldn't believe it. And I actually sent one of those pictures to Entertainment Tonight for their 50th anniversary so that they could put it out there.
Good. Now, this is a still from the video that the little.
Yes. Not many of you probably know that Celestis recently did a launch of Enterprise folks into deep space. And Dee they never thought they would ever be able to get Dee because he had passed away so long ago. There was no DNA.
Right.
Well, I had a lock of Dee's hair because when Dee passed away, Carol asked me if I would get a lock of his hair before Neptune Society came. And I said I would. I asked if I could get one for me too. And she said yes. So I had a lock of Dee's hair, and Mark Lee, you know Mark Lee, don't you?
Mhm, right.
He's a ambassador he's a Star Trek guy. I mean, he's an MC, but he's also an ambassador for Celestis. And he was on my show, my podcast one time, and mentioned Celestis. And I said, I want to talk to you after the show. And I said, I have a lock of Dee's hair. Could they do something with that to get him on that Enterprise launch? Because I just can't see that going without the Neptune Society. Is the society that cremates people and scatters their ashes at sea.
Right.
Dee and Caroline wanted to be scattered at sea off Point Furman in Long Beach, because that's where they had spooned and you know, dated and been young lovers, and that's where they wanted to be,
in the community theater. And
yes, the community theater. That's where they wanted to be together in the they loved the beach. So so where was I going? Anyhow, so I told Mark I had it. They asked the Celestis folks, and they said, absolutely, we want that lock of hair. And so then they did whatever they do to bring it down into DNA. And so it got to be launched when the other one. And it was really, really touch and go, because you remember part of that mission failed on the moon. Yeah. And we didn't know if the part of the capsule that contained the Star Trek folks that were going into deep space had separated before the failure, but it had. So they are on their way to deep space to this day.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I'm going to say, so I think it preserved in YouTube, but as far as my Restream interface right here, I had a glitch or something, and when I reset, it looks like I lost the chat. So I'm going to tell everybody live with us today, if you had a question for Kris and it happens further back than about 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, please repost it.
Okay.
In case, okay. Now, Kris, you may be seeing it all. It may just be on me. So if you do, I don't know. I've only got about 8 or 10 people here, but
I'm not sure how to scroll down on this. It's not scrolling for me. Let me see.
Okay. How many do you see? Just about 8?
I see 1, 2, 3, 4. I see about 10.
Yeah, that's okay. Then that's what I have. So.
Oh wait, there's some more.
Yeah, I'm just letting everybody know that if you popped up with something early on for Kris, or just a comment, if you want to repost it again, that would be good. Well, and I don't want to take away from you. You've had some orders for the book, by the way, just while we've been on.
Oh, thank you. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed writing it, and as much as the people enjoy. Whoever, now I have my own fans. People write to me and say, "Oh, I love that book so much."
Kris, you can't hide around the corner anymore.
I guess not. Well, that's one nice thing about being a writer. You could be kind of, unless you're J.K. Rowling or somebody, you can really write pretty well in plain sight.
Well, the nature of
I got to run around going, wearing McCoy stuff and stuff like that.
So many authors used to. I mean, writers very introverted a lot, and the way they promote now, everybody has to do social to promote. So
I call it writing is show business for shy people.
There you go.
Yeah.
So this is the 20th. What got me was, and I thought of this a few weeks ago, and I'd forgotten until you poked me about it the other day. But the 25th anniversary. I mean, if you were a fan long enough, and maybe people in the chat can share this too. Like, I definitely remember where I was when I heard the news, and I had heard vaguely that he was not doing well. And this is crazy, because you were obviously you were off and working with them, and you were there. And I don't want to take anything away from the book, but you could even share, what the last day or two or whatever was like, whatever you feel like sharing. I'm just going to say that we were actually at a convention in North Carolina. It was actually a paid, and Janet and I were a twofer then, because Janet was working on Voyager, and or had just wrapped she had just quit, but was still doing part-time after the 5th season. Anyway, we were still doing our slideshows for cons and bringing behind the scenes and all that. And I had just been working on The Communicator as editor for a few months. and a whole mix of things going on. But basically, it was a Friday, right?
Yes, it was.
Yes, it was a Friday. We were in High Point, North Carolina, which is a furniture capital, and this trade mart that they normally use for the big furniture show for like a month, and then the rest of the year it sits empty, and they rent it out to events. But it's mainly there for anyway. So we were in this big, empty, sprawling thing using a fraction of it. And it wasn't a big con. It was, between 500 and 1,000 people, really. But we were about to go on, and, this is no cell phones, no Twitter, nothing dinging on no news alerts are going off on your phone.
Yeah.
But we had a cell phone. They just weren't smartphones. And we were standing around waiting, and for a while, Janet had our smartphone because she's the one that drove more than I did. And we were standing there, and I had talked to somebody the last big con, maybe a couple of months earlier, and somebody who was in the know fanish said, Dee's not doing well or something. I bought an autographed call sheet or something. But we're standing here, and Janet comes over to me and says, come over here. You need to sit down. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she says, come over here and sit down. So I did. And she goes, D. Kelley just died. And I was like, what? And I did say, I plunked. I was like, what?
Yeah.
And it was like, because you had this vague, you'd heard that he wasn't well, but it was like, well, that was fact. Because the other thing is, back, no bloody A, B, C, or D. Gene had passed, obviously, in 91. And Mark Leonard had died about 96 or so. But this was 1999. They had done the 30th anniversary that I'd seen in Huntsville. That's where I had a great picture with him. My favorite picture, the only picture I have with him, aside from him signing a book 10 years older. I mean, we were not, I was still I went to go see him at a con stage, and I had just become professional enough the last few years that I'd wanted to work with him on something. But that day, I like plunked, and I was like, oh my gosh. And we were just about to go in for the opening ceremonies. And Janet said, I wanted to tell you before you heard from someone else, like in front of a crowd or something or whatever. So I said, okay. And then it was like, oh, but it was a paradigm shift. It's like when one of your parents passes. It's like life is never quite the same.
Yeah.
It's different. It's fine. You move on. But something has shifted.
Yes.
And it's this, and it was like, oh, but my point was he was the first of the main cast.
Yes, he was.
To go.
Yes, he was.
And that was a shift, but just the fact that he was like, oh, and my guy went. And then, then it dawned on me a few days later, and I got on the phone with Dan Madsen. I said, we had an issue that was like 3/4 finished of the communicator. And I said, we have to pull up stakes and do this. So it was the first time they did a thing for Gene, but that was like 8 years earlier, before the boom and before, the magazine was bigger and all that. So I showed this, earlier, but we pulled up, and just, it's kind of like, I don't know, Patton turning north on no notice to go relieve Bastogne at the Battle of the Bull. And it was one of those kinds that we just like, stop.
I have several copies of it. I'm glad you did it, because it is beautiful. And
then we went into, but that day, I got myself together and said, thank you. I told her, thank you, dear, for doing that. And then we went in, and in all the hubbub of the opening ceremonies and blah, 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 of an old school convention, I asked whoever was in charge. And there were one or two other actors. I couldn't even tell you who the other guests. We might have been the only Trek people there might not have been an actor. But I just went to the MC and I said, can I have the mic to make an announcement before we start? And I just announced, I told that crowd that Dee had passed, and everybody there was a gasp and an awe and all that. So I'll always remember where I was.
Yeah.
When I heard that. And then the magazine change up and everything happened soon after. And then to find out later that it was stomach cancer, was it?
Yeah. Which
is like one of the most painful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They kept him very comfortable.
Yeah. Good.
They did. Yeah.
Good.
Richard Arnold told Terry Rio that he was in your
who did Dee's biography book.
He was in your situation. Yeah, Terry Rio wrote Dee's biography, From Sawdust to Stardust. He was in your position. He heard a rumor that Dee had passed away, and he said, I'd heard it so many times before.
Right.
So I called up Paramount, and the person answering the phone was sobbing, and I knew it was true. So I reconfirmed that it was true, that's
Right.
why she was crying. And I went out and I told the crew, I told the fans, and he said, and then we just all cried together. And when Terry told me that story, that's the first time I cried since Dee died.
Yeah.
In fact, I didn't cry immediately after I had cried so much before. I mean, I was kind of cried out, you know, but after he passed, there was so much to do. They told me they were going to hold the news for 3 hours, and that Dee had beside his bed
On a Friday afternoon.
Yeah. But beside Dee's bed, he had a list of 14 people that he wanted me to call before the news would hit the airwave. You need to call these people and tell them I'm gone before they hear it on the news, because if they're driving or whatever, they could drive into a tree. I just don't want them to hear that way, you know?
So these are the last few weeks of his life. He's given you this list of 14 names to contact when he does pass.
Yes.
He's being very clear-eyed about it.
So I had 2.5 hours essentially to call 14 people, only 2 of whom I knew.
Oh.
None of whom knew he was even sick. He hadn't wanted to bother them with this news. He didn't want it. Why? There's nothing you can do about it. Just leave
So
it.
you get to be the one that tells people who are close enough to him to be on his list that he's not only sick, but he's gone.
His 2 nephews, the people he had served in the armed forces with, people who had gone to the Battle of the Bulge. Well, he wasn't in the Battle of the Bulge. He didn't see any wartime
combat.
But many of his friends, several of his friends who went out never came back, and those who did came back so damaged, including his brother, that he said it was like a before and after picture. It was just heartbreaking to see what they had seen and what it had done to them. Anyhow, so I had literally 2.5 hours to call these people and break the news to them. You don't know me from Adam, but I have some terrible news for you. And, you know, I couldn't do it fast. I had to be careful with each and every one individually to do that. And so, I mean, right from the get-go, I had to be really stuff my feelings, you know, and do what I needed to do. And then I took care of Caroline, of course, all that afternoon and evening. And I was there until late at night.
And people should know that she was already suffering from her muscular disease. Yes.
Caroline had a broken leg.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that never healed. Yeah. She had been in the hospital for like from April to April, May, June. She had been in the hospital for 14 months with a broken leg when Dee died. I mean, if she had been able, she would have been taking care of him. It wouldn't have been me. I mean, she did everything. She was his, you know, she was his everything, and she did everything, you know.
Well, they didn't have kids. It was the 2 of them.
Right.
And I know it hit me. I think someone said it, or you said someone said it, but basically you kind of, in some ways, kind of became the daughter they never had. That's
what Terry Rigo told me after the fact. That was the other time I cried, because she told me I was sitting, what a place. We were sitting in a restaurant when she told me the Richard Arnold story about, he said, I told the fans, and we cried together. And I cried at that point, and I said, I know I was where I was supposed to be with Caroline, but how I envy the people who could be there with other fans and cry, and cry when they cry, you know, because I had to be strong. Right. I couldn't be there crying. Caroline wasn't crying. I had to do this thing. You know, I had this role to play.
And that was rough. I didn't realize that until the last couple of days.
It was rough.
And calling strangers to tell them this horrible.
Yeah. And then we're sitting in a restaurant, and Terry says to me, "Do you realize you were the daughter they never had?" And I teared up again in the restaurant. I went, "Oh, don't say that." And she said, "Why not?" I said, "Because if that's true, I didn't do enough for them." And she said, "Kris, you did everything they asked, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah, but it wasn't enough." And she says, "They never would have accepted anything else." And I'm like, oh, you know. So I think over time, then the more as time went by and I realized, my God, Kris, how blind were you? I mean, I kept thinking they were being so kind to a fan. I mean, yeah, I was a really, really good fan and I was helping promote them and I was writing articles about them, but I thought it was like, what do you want to call transactional kind of? I scratch your back, you scratch my back, you know, that kind of a thing. I just never took it as they considered me a friend. And then after he passed away, Terry started doing these interviews and we went down to Long Beach and talked to their friends that they'd known since they were 18 and 19. And they said, oh no, we've known about Kris for years. They always called you a friend, you know? So over this period of time is when I learned that, oh my God, you know, I was pushing it away thinking this can't be real. I mean, you know, I'm doing this. No. I mean, I'm imagining all this. I'm imagining all this, you know, that I wasn't imagining that.
You needed a springboard.
I was never imagining that. Yeah. And then I looked back, well, they bought you a car, Kris. Hello? Dee walked around in the neighborhood knocking on doors trying to find somebody who would let you have a serval cat in their backyard. I mean, they went out of their way in ways my parents never went out of their way for me, you know? And I thought, oh my God, you know, but it was all in retrospect. And the other thing was, the thing that finally sealed it for me was, how many people invite you in to die with them? People invite you to live with them when your times are good, but how many trust you enough to ask you to come help at a time like that, you know? And I just threw it with my mom with brain cancer, and they knew I could do it. They know I was strong enough to do it.
Yeah.
So it was.
Well, the thing I mean, they didn't have kids. The thing was that I always heard about them and saw just a little bit. I went by and visited Caroline after Dee had passed. I have no special. He was special to me.
Yes.
Once or twice. And the favorite picture I have is at the 30th, we're sitting on a couch together, but I interviewed him and it'd been 2 or 3 years after I came to LA and was working in Star Trek and general.
I remember the picture of you on the couch.
Came at him, and that's where we did an actual regular interview, but that's where I closed. And this was before the news about, and Terry's, maybe they had talked about it. I don't know what the evolution of it was. And Terry but I said, because everybody else had done their autobiographies except Dee by then. Everybody else in the original cast had done that.
Trying to get him to do it.
And he was the only one. And I said, Dee, let's work on your biography together. I've always been a fan. I said, dropping the professionalism here now, you have always been, I told him, I said, okay, we've done our thing. Now I can tell you. I said, I loved the show. I was a fan, loved the cast, obviously. But I said, McCoy was always my favorite character. And you were always, I said, and you were always the one, the cast I wanted to know. And he said, first thing he said was, where were you all those years I had to put up with Bill and Leonard? Which, and then I said, well, I said, you need to have your biography out there. Let's get you out there. And he said, now, if I did that, I had to go out to the garage and mess with all those boxes.
Yeah.
And I was like, inside, I was like going, really? Really? I'm thinking, it was like, really? Is this really not gonna? But by then I'd known enough of life and people in my own family and my parents and uncles and aunts. It's like, when that's the attitude, you're not gonna, if it goes beyond this, somebody you barely know, you've just flattered them and had a joke and all that, but you don't know them,
right?
So you can't you're like, nope, that's where it is. And I'm like, okay. It's like, but if you change your mind, you know where to go, that's kind of where it landed up. He even
said that thing for TV Guy. He said, no, he said that I'd have to go out in the garage and pull that out. And I wouldn't have just want it to be this I thing. I would want it to be more novelistic. I think Terry did a really good job.
She did. She did.
Dee told me that I could write of course, the book I wrote, but he said, I want you to write, you can write my biography too. And I said, Dee, I am not a biographer. I wish I had known you.
And your book that people are jumping in on is
mine is a memoir of my interactions with Dee and Caroline. It's not a biography. It's not about his career. I almost never asked about his career. I'm not a pry person at all, which is why I wouldn't make a very good interviewer. Anything anybody wants to tell me, I'm certainly willing to learn, but I don't pry. So about the only stories I ever heard about Dee's career was ones he would bring up, and usually it was Westerns.
Right. And great stories, and
yeah,
a lot of them are on.
But he did have a list of people that he gave to me and said, if you do want to do my biography, you can do my biography. And I knew I was not the person to do it. And I knew Terry Rio had just written a really good biography of someone that Bill Moyer said, I think it was of the Johnson-Nixon campaign. I mean, the
Humphrey Nixon,
Kennedy, Nixon, and the big brouhaha about the fact that Kennedy was a Catholic, and that was a big deal back then. You're going to be taking your orders from the Pope, and all that was a big, schism. And he said, no, I'm not. And Terry wrote a treatise or something like that. And Bill Moyer came up to her after she had a dissertation, after she had presented it, and he said, I don't know how you got that so right. You weren't even alive when they were alive, and you absolutely nailed that. So Bill Moyer was a big fan of hers. Terry had not met Dee, but she was a fan. And I thought, she's the person, because a fan probably shouldn't write his bio. A fan is too close, maybe. You want a biographer to be doing a bird's eye view, an aerial view with as much objectivity as possible. My book is not objective. I mean, I told Dee, I said, Dee, if you let me write your biography, I'm going to inadvertently start a new world religion. And he laughed his butt off. He just laughed. He just thought that was hysterical. I said, no, I can't write your biography, but I gave it to Terry.
Yeah,
I gave her all of the names of the people who he had grown up with,
starter,
served with, and she ran with it. And then she, of course, ran out and interviewed all the people who were still alive.
Right.
The Star Trek people.
Well, that was everybody aside from June and Mark Leonard.
Really
basically, everybody was,
if you want to get bookends about DeForest Kelley, guys, and you don't have these two books, they're like apples and oranges. Very little of it is duplicated. The only place it's duplicated is when Terry mentions things that I did, because that's where she got the source,
Right.
But most of it is his career story from a young boy.
Yeah. It's his whole life. Right. It's not just
totally
Star Trek. It's his whole life.
More academic. It's more.
Well, it's factual and sourced.
Right.
Yeah, everybody's attributed.
Right.
And she talked to me. The thing that Terry did me, she said she did an interview with me about his appeal, and she did a few fans that way, I think. But what got me was when Terry talked about insight from her. She said, well, after she heard me talk and why I enjoyed McCoy and why I enjoyed, she goes, well, now it's obvious that you're a McCoy fan and a Will Rogers fan. And I was like, there's so many trends that are alike there. And I was like, oh,
yes, there are.
I never thought, because Will was the balloon puncher. Will was the, get over yourself.
Yes.
Only from a different perspective. It was like, let's look at this. Instead of being all high and mighty, let's cut this down to plain talk. And that was McCoy's role in the show. That's what I never saw McCoy as, like the parodies would come out, and it's such McCoy. Rah, 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 rah,
yeah.
Like, oh, does he do that? It was like, oh, that's not my thing about McCoy, is when Kirk and Spock are getting too high and mighty, he kind of pulls everybody down to earth. And it's not like he's the heart, the old triad of Kirk is action and Spock is intellect and McCoy's the heart. That's true. But to me, it was like a, get the stars out of your eyes and get down and let's get on with this.
Gene Roddenberry originally wrote McCoy as a kind of H.L. Mencken, a curmudgeonly,
Yes.
And Kelley, Dee brought Kelley to McCoy. Dee brought Dee's humanism and his sense of fair play and his sense of whatever.
And when
he tamed H.L. Mencken.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when they wouldn't let Gene cast Dee out of the gate as his doctor, and he went to, guys who had played, they wanted a Milburn Stone,
Yeah.
James Arness dynamic, because what's in their head.
Yes.
Here's the lead and here's his doc. And they
Mhm.
wanted that like generational separation. And so he has Paul Fix and he has John Hoyt.
Yeah.
The white-headed doctors.
Yeah.
And it was okay. But then, it's like he finally like, no, I want D. And part of it was getting over the fact he'd always played bad guys. And people won't accept DeForest Kelley's a good guy, a sympathetic character. And he did, but he had that quality, but it was more of a contemporary. It wasn't that, anyway, it's like the fact that Gene knew what he wanted all along and had to do what they wanted.
I had also heard that some people thought that McCoy was racist because he was always girding on.
See, that's the thing that's come up the last
he wasn't racist. He was trying to get Spock to embrace his human half. He wasn't trying to. Sorry.
Well, I'll say, I mean, I've seen that come up the last 5-10 years, and people are just looking at transcripts and, well, you green-blooded, so, and, it's like a racial epithet. It's like, no, that's a person. That's the good news is that's not racist. That's personal, but it's personal, it's friend to friend personal.
Exactly.
If like Spock, I don't know if you've seen this, but Spock is no dummy.
Right.
And why would Spock have this racist guy he had to deal with come down to basically be one of his groomsmen at his wedding?
Why would they offer their lives for each other so many times?
Right. Why would Spock put up with it? Number one, and then and then you get 5,000, Zarabeth and all the rest of that.
Was upset because
he's reverted to being a feral Vulcan, and of course, when you're wounded, traumatic, you say things. We say things to our loved ones that are hateful and hurtful at times when we're wounded. So,
right.
Anyway,
right.
Well, I was just amazed that I was like, no.
No, I never did see that. It never even occurred to me. It was just he was just yanking his chain, pulling his strings, doing whatever he could to get him to not be so damn logical.
Yeah. And I think the whole ensemble got better I would have loved to have seen that in the TV days when they were all younger.
Yeah.
But between the lesser character, I say lesser, the characters on down the call sheet, getting more screen time and more ensemble feel than the occasional, use on the show. But it kills me that in the middle of, and you read Bob Justman and Herb Solo's book, the middle of Shatner Nimoy's dance about how they would settle things is, it starts off Shatner's the lead. It's a 60s show. You got a lead, second banana, and everybody else. And the idea that Spock comes out of nowhere and is hugely successful. And then you even to read later on, where Nichelle would say, secretly, Uhura was getting as much fan mail as Spock was, but they weren't about to go there for a woman and a black woman and to be so far down the totem pole. That was, they had enough to deal with the upset between Spock and Nimoy. But for them to go through all their Sturm and Drang at the end of the first season and then find, and they're going to, and Spock and Nimoy might walk, and we're preparing casting lists of who we get to play Spock in his place. And that's crazy. And, and Shatner's like, hey, you hired me to be the lead of the show, right? We love Leonard. It's great. He's great. But let's, and Leonard's like, you're underpaying. In the middle of all that, Bob Justman quietly comes over and says, I think we need to elevate D to, above the line. And he's getting residuals now. I mean, like just that whole brouhaha is going on. And they very quietly go, D, we want to bump you up. It's like, we're already going to be spending more. By the time the dust is cleared over here, we're going to be spending more on these guys on our little dinky budget. But D, even with that going on, we want to bump you up and get you more. You know what I mean? I'm like, what is, and that to me, it's like, and once again, it's like the quiet quality, the quiet strength, just the presence, the unconventional, no, not a method, not making a big thing about career and acting and his craft. He's just out there doing his job and he just puts it out there and everything anyway.
Do you remember?
That's the thing that amazes me.
I think it was in Terry's book. There was this one point where apparently Shatner and Nimoy were being a real pain in the butt to Gene Roddenberry, and he was going to dress them down. He wrote him this really terse letter. You guys need to, dial it down. And at the bottom, he realized he hadn't said anything much about D, and he was the third, and he says, and D, I'm sure that if you tried at all hard, you could be a real pain in the butt too, He needed to include him, but he couldn't include him in the same way. You know,
It wasn't yeah.
you wouldn't. You know,
He's the quiet
if
kid.
you try a little bit harder, you could be a real pain in the butt too.
It's like he was the middle child of the family that was just doing his thing and going along. I'm gonna dive into. I think we've got some comments or questions here. So there's one here. Mabella, one. She's talking about the day we heard, that he died. I was in my high school finishing grades and final exams, heard that DeForest Kelley had walked on from this world, and I cried in my empty classroom. I felt like I got a surprise punch in my stomach. I had met all the other folks at conventions, but I never got to meet DeForest Kelley. Yeah, I mean, the more time goes by, I hear fans saying that, oh, Jazz, not a day goes by that you don't think of D.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, and in the UK, you didn't know he was so ill. Well, again, it hit everyone like
very
that.
Very few people.
Well, he didn't tell. And now that it's all out, he had 14 close people that he never told he was ill, that fell on you to do that.
Yeah, he just didn't want people. One of the things he said to me was, my God, you realize if it went out, I would get 50,000 letters and I feel I'd have to answer them all, because he was very, very conscientious. If anybody took the time to write to him, if he couldn't at least answer one, he would at least send a photo, and he just said, oh my, I can't deal with that. I cannot deal with that.
Yeah.
I remember we called Shatner's house one time, and Stephanie, his assistant, pick up the phone, and she said, well, where are you, Dee? And he said, well, I'm in the hospital. I'm fighting this cancer thing. And it was the first time she had heard. She said, oh, nobody ever told me that. And he said, oh, well, people aren't supposed to know. So
it was the C word too.
But Shatner came and visited him in the hospital. Nichelle came and visited him in the hospital. Teresa Victor, Leonard was out of the country when this came down. Leonard was in another country when this happened. So yeah, he was very dearly loved by everybody who either worked with him or knew him in any way.
Yeah. Here's another one. Donna, he was the only main actor I never met. I attended a con in Pennsylvania he was supposed to be at, and he wasn't able to come. Heard afterward. So that was one of the one of the last one. Narda is our TTLer who's in the outback in Australia, and she gets it. Yeah, that he was a very private. Well, that's why you say, and it's not like, oh, look how close I am with. I mean, people can misread that, because a lot of the rest of the cast, Walter and George, Jimmy would talk about how they were never invited in to Dee and Caroline's, and it wasn't like, oh no, you can't come in. It just never came up.
It had something to do with, I think they wanted to keep his professional career separate from his home life. He just really, I think Jonathan Frakes made it in a time.
Well, if anybody would, it would be
Jonathan Frakes, I believe, came in there. As far as I know, that's the only cast member, I think. Rick Berman lived right across the street from them.
Right.
Across the street and over a little bit. I'm sure he was in a time or two.
Catty corner.
Especially after the earthquake, because they were, looking in on each other and
the 91.
Making sure everybody was okay.
Here's Edward Smith saying, love you, Kris.
That's my dear friend. When I had a serval, he had a lion during the same time. Yeah, I've known him for 40 years. No relation. We have the same last name, but we live in the same neck of the woods.
And my Patreoner here, Comedy Forecast, says, love you. Thanks for being where you needed to be.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
And here's Narda saying exactly what Terry said. If you did everything they asked of you, then you were doing even more than a daughter was doing.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So,
it was my pleasure and my pain.
Yeah.
But I had done it for my mom, and they knew I could do it. So it was like, they had done so much for me. It was like, I would have left my job. I mean, if Dan had told me I couldn't go, I would have left my job, because it was like, no, this is my second family as far as I'm concerned.
Well, how great was that your boss and your boss at Warner's was
so
a Trek fan?
fabulous.
Yes.
Yeah, Dee called him up one time to thank him, and ended up crying. He said, "You are just so wonderful to let her do that." She said, "Dee, anything you need, don't worry about it. She'll take care of it."
Yeah. So here's
and
Scott.
he sent him. Dee sent me gave me a signed photo for Dan Kronstadt that said, "Thank you for you know what." He didn't even mention what it was, but Dan knows for what.
So Scott's my assistant and a big fan. Is that as a kid, McCoy was hard for me to relate to, but the older I get, the more lovely and real and brilliant I can see McCoy and Dee. Yeah.
I really related to him because it seemed to me that he was nearly always right, and he didn't, nobody seemed to know. And I kind of felt that way too, like a little alien kid who knew this stuff, and like, why don't you see that?
So Narda said, McCoy's never been racist. To people who say things like that have a racist heart. Narda, I think we just live in I don't think the people that said that were racist. I think a lot of people are just so overly cautious that they see one thing out of context and they jump.
And the other thing you also need to realize is this thing takes place in the 23rd century. There's a Black woman aboard the Enterprise. There were actually some episodes where somebody was racist against Vulcan. You leave that in your quarters. You don't bring that here on the.
Yeah.
They did deal with racism on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Wanda. That's very.
Thank you.
Very sweet of you to say that. Alonka's saying nice to see and hear you.
Yeah, she's in Germany.
Yeah. Yes. And Christian saying thanks for sharing.
Thank you, Christian.
And Carl has been a fan for many, many, many years. And he says Dee was one of the few that he didn't get to meet. I know. My whole thing with Dee at the beginning was he was my favorite. And and in the 80s, I was a kid getting out of school, getting a job, getting our, like you were talking about, driving across the state to see him, getting your mobility and your disposable income, to where you can do things like that. And the first, like the Con of Wrath in Houston was the first time that blew up. Although I found out I would have had a chance to meet and get an autograph, but that was part of the chaos of the weekend. There was a con in Shreveport, Louisiana, and I got something, not strep, something where I couldn't go because I was sick. And this was the 80s, and I was like watching him, I'm like, he's getting small. I was like, he's going to waste away to nothing before I get to see him finally. And I finally did get to meet him in 86 or 84 at a con in St. Louis. And he walked the line, and I'm so proud of it. And now I know how rare it is because he stopped personalizing after a while. But I had before I had him sign a photo, I had my medical reference book. And I said, would you sign it to Larry, just an old country doctor, D. Kelley? And he did. And I know that very soon after that, he stopped doing extra stuff. Unless he knew, like just a fan in a line, he wouldn't do that after a while.
Did you say you were at the Con of Wrath?
Yes.
I heard, and tell me if this is true, Harv Bennett said at Dee's star ceremony. Did you go to Dee's star ceremony?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, not the star ceremony. I was at the memorial on the lot. But
okay. At Dee's star ceremony, Harv Bennett, you can see this on YouTube, by the way, folks. Harv Bennett said about the Con of Wrath, he said, I got off the plane and he said, D. Kelley, Dr. McCoy said, all the fans are in the streets.
It's in my trailer.
They stole the money. We don't have a convention. You've got to do something. And Harv Bennett, I guess he was some detachment with some kind of a defense military ministry thing going on. He arranged to have it all happen. And half of the actors wanted to go home because they weren't going to get paid. And I heard that he and Dee, or maybe just Dee, I heard that Dee and someone else actually emceed the thing for free.
No, D didn't. D
No,
was there and stayed and stuck it through, but
he
he didn't.
stayed.
He
It
didn't.
appeared.
Yeah,
Okay.
Harv kind of did, but they had Mark Leonard kind of the stage show without going
Okay.
down this thing. But
Okay.
there's I have it on my trailer. We used a little bit of when we did a trailer years ago when we first started on it. Was he said D Kelley comes running up to me and says, "It's a catastrophe. It's chaos. And if we don't do something about it, Star Trek, it's all over. It's all over."
We can't disappoint the fans. We
The
can't.
whole thing, yeah.
It's not their fault, you know? Yeah.
Let's see.
Oh, Narda, you said as a kidlet, I always wanted Bones to hug me. He seems so gentleman. I have to tell you about a story. He was in Denver. You may have been there at the same convention. And this lady, probably 35-year-old lady, stood up and she told just this horrendous story about her childhood. And I mean, it was,
Was this the weekend that was Patrick Stewart's first convention?
I believe so.
Okay. Yes, I was. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And she stood up and she said, also asked me to say, mention Brent Spiner to me next. Anyhow, she stood up and she said, she told the story and she says, and when I was 15, I really didn't want to be here anymore. And I realized, but then she said, then I adopted you as kind of my father. Dr. McCoy is kind of my father, you know. And she said, so you don't know me from Adam, but may I get a hug? And he stepped forward and he put his arms out and he said, come to Papa. Oh, God. There was not a dry eye in the house, you know?
Yeah.
And when Brent Spiner did his first Star Trek convention, Dee was going to be at that one. And Brent Spiner had been a stand-up comic. He'd been an actor, but he did not know what to. He knew about the.
He put off doing cons for 3 or 4 years.
He knew about the iconic nature of Star Trek, and he was scared, really scared to do his first convention. And he said to Dee, "I just don't know what they expect. I just don't know." And Dee said, "He said, what do I do?" And Dee said, "Just love them." Just love them. And he went out there and he was himself and he just loved them.
Yeah.
You know? Because that's what Star Trek fans are there for.
Yeah. Well, someone
to love you and to feel like you see me too.
When the I don't know if it was the next, I think it was when the Voyager cast was new and there were some of them. There was always like one actor in the cast who had been a fan, with Voyager. It was Tim Russ with or got it. I mean, with the DS9 cast, it was Armin wasn't a fan. Well, Armin was a fan, but he'd done Buffy and had already been
Whoopi.
And
Whoopi was a fan.
And Michael Dorn had been a fan with his brother and Dexter. But I want to say it was Roxanne Dawson who was really hesitant, like same kind of thing, nervous about going like, what do I do? What do I And someone basically said, and I forget now who it was, but basically said, look, being a Star Trek cast member and walking on a stage at a convention audience, they said that is the only time in your performing career where they love you before you ever walk on stage. It's like you don't have to do a thing,
right?
Because they're already. It's not like you have to go out and have a good show and then they applaud at the end.
Right.
They already love you when you walk on stage.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, but because they felt like I have to perform, and I have to, and not blow it. I can't go out and look like a heel and blow, that they.
I think that was Brent's concern, especially since he was a stand-up comic. I mean, if you're not making somebody laugh every 3 or 4 seconds, you're bombing.
Right.
So he didn't know what to do, where to go. Just love him.
It's hard to think about, Mr. Wit every,
yes.
dropping a one-liner every 2 seconds and snarking back, ever being paranoid about this. So Myth Dustards is saying it was great that you were, has heard you speak on other podcasts and impressed with how that relationship was always there and then bloomed at the end. And Christian saying, sorry, never had the chance to meet. Well, we have YouTube and interviews and videos and thing. The Myth Dusters, there's video out there of Dee telling stories. The one about the water tank and Henry Fonda and falling in the, yeah, I can't do it justice. It's been a while since I've heard it, but they're out there if you want to go find them. And some of that's in your book, some of it's in Terry's book too.
Yes.
Let me see here. Everybody thanking everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Miss Dustard says it's the first time to see you. She's heard your voice on a lot of other podcasts.
Oh, really? Usually my podcast.
There you go.
Podcasts I'm on are
you've done some video. You did video that you had me on for. We talked about Dee. Yeah.
I used to do a show called Ever New, which there's lots of Dee talk on that one. You can go into old shows there.
Yeah.
You want me to send you the link, Larry, so you can put that up if people
sure. Or you can put it if you got the chat, you could put it in yourself if you want to just
okay. Let me see if I can
put it in.
Let me see if I can find it real quick.
This is funny. Comedy Forecast said Dee was at a con in 84 in LA, 85. He read some article talking about how old, probably it was a review of a movie. Some reviewer said, like, why are you putting these geezers on film? They're so old. And says he read it deadpan and it was hilarious. Some reviewer talking about how old they all were.
Oh, Dee did a poem about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Great Bird's Dream. But he's talking about some reviewer was being scathing about why are they putting these old fogies on camera, and he did. Oh yeah, the Great Bird's, the Big Bird's Dream,
right?
And I always love the line about him.
Let's see, how do I do that? How do I put
what's
that
up with Kelley? What's in his life? He's still in the valley with the very same wife.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Larry, I'm not sure how to put it in the chat, so I just put it in.
Okay. I will. Okay. Well, I've got this. You should here. So this is what's this a link to?
The NDB Media one.
Oh, okay.
That should send you to all of the one. It isn't all 100% Dee Kelley, but at least a quarter of every show.
This is your is it video?
It was it was a podcast called
it's audio or it's video?
Both.
Okay. Well, boom, and it's Ever New.
It's called Ever New.
Yeah. So this is Chris's, and there's an awful lot of Dee material there.
Yeah.
Everybody. Yes, Christoph. They even love the behind the scenes folks before they walk on stage.
Yes.
So here's Myth Dustards. What's your social? We should probably wrap up. I want people to watch this on YouTube later. What's your how can they follow you?
I'm Kris M. Smith on Facebook.com. Kris with a K on Facebook in Tacoma, Washington. Let me see.
Kris M. Smith on Facebook, I think, is your main one.
I have LinkedIn, of course. That's more professional stuff.
Okay.
Oh, I know. Let me send you to my website, yellowballoonpublications.com.
Yellow
Balloon Publications, one balloon, yellowballoonpublications.com.
As opposed to 99 red balloons. Okay.
Yes.
Publications.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other one, my business website is wordwhisperer.net. And I do lots of blogs on that. In fact, I just did one yesterday for today about Dee. Wordwhisperer.net. I would say those are the ones I can think of at the moment.
There we go. All right. Well, listen, Kris, I should let you go. We've had a great time here.
Thank you.
Oh, I want to ask, there was one thing.
Okay.
I actually did this on the run while you were talking.
Okay.
Because I'd meant to do this and I keep forgetting. This is one last. We mentioned AC Lyle, who is a legend in his own right. What am I doing here? Why can I not? Hello. There we go. Boom. I'm going to post this picture. This is a party they had for AC at Paramount.
I believe it was his 90th or his 70th anniversary.
Yeah, because he says he was a page at the Paramount Theater when he was 6 or 12 or something. Or anyway, they had so they said it was his 80th or his 90th anniversary with Paramount or something. But D showed up and wanted to see him because AC had been he and Caroline's best man.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, back in the day when AC was a publicist and did that a lot. AC was Reagan's best man with Nancy. Yes. Anyway, D got himself by and wanted to go by and see him, but this was the last time D was out in public. Is that correct?
I believe that's true. He was very, very ill at that time.
He was very ill here in this picture, but he got himself up. Now, were you working with him? Was that in your 4 months window or before?
Was that what? No, that was during the same time. No, that was before I was working with him. Yeah.
Okay. Because I was going to ask you if you had a memory of this, but those facts are all true. D was
I was supposed to be at that. I was supposed to be at that too. AC sent me a invitation. He said, but I never got it, and it really bummed him out because he knew D was going to be there.
AC's a legend.
And I was both of their star polishers.
Anyway,
I want to do one of the final voicemail messages D sent me. You can tell his voice is weak here, but I want to.
Oh my goodness!
I want to play it for you.
Okay, hold on.
This is DeForest Kelley. Just calling to check up on you. So when you get a chance, give me a buzz.
Wow.
Did you hear it?
Yeah, barely.
Yeah, it's
barely, sir. Yeah.
Well, he, as you know, he spoke very, very soft spoken. Even when he was well, you had to practically lean in to hear him. He just had I think he had to project a lot as McCoy and as an actor because he had this really soft voice.
Mm-hmm.
And quite often I found myself going, what are you saying? Yeah. And this is before I lost my hearing too.
Yeah.
I haven't lost it, but I certainly don't have the hearing that I had when I was 48.
Well, thank you though. Hearing and talking and doing all the things today. Thanks for coming on and doing this. I cannot believe it's been 25
I can't either.
years since that. Because one thing, I said this, I was kind of rolling into this at the beginning. So many actors, so many Star Treks, so many tones, and we have animation again with the voice actors. And we have characters and people have their favorites and things come in and out of style. Pendulum swings on, the way people look at the different shows or the way shows coming down the pike are going to be looked at and all that. And a few weeks ago, I did a topic here because some of the, when the JJ movies came out, and as far as not the actors, but the roles, and you see a lot of Kirk, Spock, and Uhura. And I get it. They're marketing. They need to have for the girls. They need to have, women's faces out there. They need to have that. They should have done more with Nichelle when they had her in the 60s, obviously. But it was the time, you can't change history.
Right.
And, the whole ensemble should have been used better. But that was 20 years ahead of time of LA Law and Hill Street Blues, the Revolution. So, but it's interesting as they go back to that era, whether they're just marketing the original series or they're re-envisioning it for the JJ movies or now in Strange New Worlds. And I didn't want to be crass here, but I'm like Kirk is always going to be Kirk. Spock is always going to be Spock. Scotty is always going to be Scotty. He's got beam us up Scotty. He's in the line. Uhura, increasingly, Nichelle and Uhura as a woman, as a black, Sulu as an Asian, as another, and then George as a gay icon who helped lead the, and Walter is still with us and is kind of in a little bit of a renaissance right now. I'd say he's kind of blooming. It's like the entire cast. And then my selfish little corner was like, it's like D and McCoy, even with Carl Urban's incredible performance, and I wish D had been able to see it.
I do too.
Channeling him.
I do too.
Better than any, in an amazing cast full, I thought Carl stood out as the one that had that little thing.
Absolutely. But
even with that, I'm like, and I was like, is it going to take showing up on Strange New Worlds for McCoy to come back in? Again, I'm not trying to, I always say, don't judge, don't keep score. It's not a contest. But I'm like, I don't want D and McCoy, especially D though, to fall through the cracks. And so we've got you speaking, we've got, your books, we've got Terry's books.
I have some really
we've got the video that's out there. Yeah.
I have some really good news for you, Larry, if you're worried about that. most of the people who reach out to me these days are not people who met him ever. It's people who didn't, and
Yes.
who are now, because of the remastered, most of the people who reach out to me now are 20 to 25, well, I would say 16 to 25 years old. They have discovered him. They have fallen head over heels for McCoy or for Dee. They've gone to YouTube. They've seen what they can, and they say, I want more. And then they usually buy my book, and sometimes they end up buying all 6 follow-up editions of the phone calls that we shared, because after I wrote the first one, everybody said, I want more. I want to know every interaction you ever had with him. I mean, hello. And so I went into all of my phone records, because whenever they would call, I would take little notes about what we had talked about. That's how you get books, you know. And I ended up with another 500,000 words that didn't make it up into the first book. And again, you have to be an absolute diehard DeForest Kelley aficionado to even want to read the other 6, because it's so, like I said, like in my dream, the dream that came true, where I was in the room in their home with them, talking about the most mundane things. I mean, songs, cheerful little earful. I mean, things that you won't get in the original book, because I mean, you have to stop somewhere. But then people said, no, I want more. I want it all. I want everything. And I thought, okay, I'll empty my brain, because at least I haven't left.
You ask for it.
You ask for it. And
here it comes.
Yeah.
Well, somewhere when I was first feeling my oats, and getting out into the world, and I had a little bit of money and a little bit of wherewithal, and I joined the DeForest Kelley Association of Fans.
That was Leonard Nimoy, the fan communique.
Well, Karen Popovich was the.
Oh, okay. I got the wrong one.
Anyway, it was the one that was out. I thought it was DKAF, but anyway.
LKAF, Leonard Nimoy Association.
Yeah, maybe I've got the. Anyway, somewhere I found that
they were
moving. I found my membership card in the DeForest Kelley, whatever
fan
it was called. Yeah.
Were my you don't remember. It's been so long. I've got all of them. All of my little, but most of them ended up in the book. So if you didn't get the fan communique, you'll get them one way or another.
Anyway, well, listen, this has been so great, and I'm glad to hear that, because that was the inclination. In fact, when I played McCoy for the first time I went to Continues to do that we had a lot of kids, college age kids who were on crew, working in costumes and on set, and I came in and was fitting and coming in ahead of time, and it was all on the run. It was all very low key, right? But I'm meeting everybody. I didn't know. I knew 2 or 3 people. I'd met a couple once, and a couple other people I knew a little bit longer. And here's 50, 60 people I'm suddenly getting to know. But all these college age, the girls especially, kept coming in and saying, oh my God, this is so exciting, Larry, this is so cool. It's nice to meet you. Nice to be. But they'd always say, McCoy was my favorite. And I was like, guys or girls, you don't have to say that. Like, it's fine, this is gonna be fun, I'm excited to be. You don't have to say that to butter. You don't have to blow smoke up, and they're like, no, McCoy really was my favorite. And and it was like, okay, after the first one, and then I'm like, did you guys, after 4 or 5 of those, I'm like, and they're all 18, 19, 20, and this was 10 years ago, you're right, but I'm like, did you guys like get together and plan this big joke on me to all? And they're like, no. I mean, but that's what really got me to, because then I went back to thinking what he told me that day on the sofa in '96 about, well, where were you when I had to put up with Bill and Leonard?
J.G. Hirschler, when Dee was in the hospital, J.G. Hirschler sent him not knowing he was in the hospital, sent him a letter inviting him to go to Germany with him. And he had to, of course, decline because he was sick. But J.G. Hirschler said, no, it had never occurred to me before. In this letter, he said this. It had I'd never thought about it before. But when a fan asked me the other day, who is your favorite Star Trek character? Boom, it was McCoy. And Dee teared up. The J.G. Hirschler would say that. McCoy, And he said, oh my gosh.
The one-time linebacker.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, Kris, why don't we end it there?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. And it dawns on me, I sit here and worry about McCoy, falling through the cracks among, perception. But here we've just done, maybe I should make a part 1 and part 2 just so people aren't scared away on YouTube. But here we've done a little bit. And from the reaction of everybody in the chat, it's all good. It's all good.
For those of you who did not get a chance to meet Dee, I wrote the book for you. I seriously did. I wrote it for you because so many people said he seemed to be a nice man. And I wanted you to know he didn't just seem to be a nice man. He was the full meal deal. And the most gratifying responses I received was, oh my God, now I feel like I know him. And that's exactly what I wanted.
Very good.
Bullseye. So
well,
thank you again.
Yeah, thank you. And Plushy McCoy thanks you too. So, speaking of one of a kind, he's a one of a kind, just like Dee.
Yes.
So there we go.
All right.
Thank you so much, Kris. And thanks everybody. If you want, you can hang on, Kris, or I can take you out, or if I'm just going to do my wrap ups here and everything.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
Let me, because I need to go full screen. I'll let you watch from the corner. How's that?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure.
No, I just want to, I have my thank yous and my hellos and goodbyes. First of all, I want to thank all of our Patreon folk there once again. This is a slightly new list, everybody. So I want to thank Diana Hopkins. And yes, maybe I should have done this first. Boom. There we go. Can I thank Diana Hopkins again? And Jesse at Crusher Convo, thanks, is a new Patreon. Lawrence Todd, Halbeard Gun Johnson, Justin Porteous, Galinda Bruton, Josh Patton, Pranakasha Productions, Chris Jiggins, Keith Rombach, Comedy Forecast, who was in, a lot of you guys were on today, Andrew Jasimski, and our TTL Live Wires. Thank you to Bob McLean, Byron Bailey, J.R. Pull, Alan Hoenzi, Dave Gregory, Greg Wicksham, and Casey Shafsky. That's everybody who's on our Patreon. It's a very simple one. It's been $5, $10 since the start. Patreon.com/Trekland Live allowed us to do a little bit more here with the channel. And we're still growing. So the best thing we can grow is just jump over and subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, and tell everybody that if you are coming to LA, business or pleasure, and you got a spare day, get in touch with me. We will work on your custom away mission. You pick the places you want to go. I've got the menu, big, small, famous, not famous. We will do it. We can do it. I'll be your host and guide and prop wrangler and whatever else you need. Pick you up door to door from your hotel. Also, we are back for our second episode of season 12 for the Trek Files. We had a little glitch this morning, but it's all good now. Our new home is at Memory Alpha. Can you believe it? Go to the Trek Files on Memory Alpha. Now it's all tabulated by season. The newest show is there. But the best thing is every episode has the documents and the audio and links back to our guest and anything else pertinent right there on Memory Alpha. Now, all of our old podcast places, including our Facebook page, are still there. I'd love for you to go and make sure you've joined the Facebook too. But it's all in one place, finally, every episode. And you can zoom around back and forth between all the episodes, find the art, find the good documents. It's all cool. Trek Files is there. And our guest this week is Phil Whalen. Speaking of folks that knew Dee. Yes, duh. What am I thinking? Yeah. The guy who directed Dee in Dinner Theater in West Texas after Star Trek and then became his stand-in for a couple of movies until Shatner came in and swooped him up. And he tells that story. This one or the next couple of times he's going to be a guest. We're going to get to that. So that's the Trek Files this week. So I just dawned on me, there's a Dee tie-in right there. Talking about the thrust of it is Star Trek 3. This is the 40th anniversary year for Star Trek 3. And we're paying attention to the anniversaries. Anyway, gang, that's going to be it. I'm Larry Nemecek on Twitter, X, whatever you're calling it this week. Please like and subscribe here on YouTube if you're watching, or go over if you're over on Facebook or whatever. Larry Nemecek's Trekland is that, and the Instagram is cool too. And if you're enjoying all this behind the scenes-ness, and I try not to be the same old you find everywhere else around the inner tubes, just come and join us at portal47.net. Picked up a new longtime lurker, finally took the plunge the other day in the portal. It's all the Star Trek you had no idea about. So with that, and thank you once again, Kris, for joining us today. I'm going to leave it there, gang. Yes, please. I've got friends who are not even though we're out of the heat of COVID, take care of yourselves, would you please? I think there was so much suppression of viral whatever that there's some waves of sickness going on. So please take care of yourself. Do all the things. Stay healthy. Do all the things. Stay woke. Check the sources. Watch out for the fake news. And yeah, everybody, trek well. And we'll see you next week.